Well, we have an election on October 12th, which is 3 weeks from Saturday, and one of the major elections statewide is for insurance commissioner. And there are only two candidates on the ballot. They are both Republicans, and they are both here, and we will give brief introductions, but during the course of this hour-long event, each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening remarks. They'll have 1 minute to respond. We'll go in alphabetical order, so that means Mr. Donelon will start, and then Mr. Temple will take the first question, Mr. Donelon the second, and so on, and I will do my best to repeat any questions, and please, only members of the press club and members of the working media, and if you could state who you are and who you're affiliated with, that would be quite helpful. But Jim Donelon is the incumbent. He's been in office since February of 2006. Prior to that, he served 19 years in the Louisiana legislature. He also was a Jefferson Parish official. He's a native of New Orleans, graduate of UNO and Loyola Law School. And Tim Temple is his opponent, also a Republican, native of DeRidder, lives in Baton Rouge, president of a family company, Timtan. He's a graduate of Southern Methodist University, and he is entering politics at the age of 49. Mr. Donelon is 74 years old. So that's the opening salvo, and we'll start with Commissioner Jim Donelon making his opening remarks. 2 minutes.
Sorry about that.
Thanks, Jim, and thank the Press Club for giving me the opportunity today to discuss the vital role that I and my staff play in our state's economy and our citizens' homes. When I became commissioner, we had just experienced the two worst hurricane events to ever visit Louisiana, and they were just 3 weeks apart. That followed shortly after the third straight insurance commissioner of our state was sent off to federal prison. Needless to say, insurers fled our state in droves or ceased writing new business. I'm proud to tell you that today we have more insurers doing business in our state across all lines than ever before. That competition has resulted in lower rates for consumers of auto, workers' comp, and homeowners insurance. This year, State Farm has lowered their auto rates by 10.5% on the 1 million policyholders they have statewide. And that was followed by Farm Bureau and Progressive Insurance lowering theirs, and together benefiting 1/2 of all drivers in our state. Employers are paying 5.5% lower premiums for the workers' comp coverage this year that they have to buy, and 19% lower than 5 years ago. That's because we have 253 insurers competing with each other for workers' comp business, an all-time high. Homeowners rates have increased just 1% per year for each of the last 5 years, due to the fact that we have 32 new insurers doing business in our state, more than replacing the exiting major national carriers who have left coastal exposure. We still have challenges in our auto insurance market, and I've been working with our legislative partners to fix our broken legal system. I'm confident that we'll be successful in that effort when the new legislature is seated next year. I believe I've contributed to our success by taking the politics and corruption out of the regulation of insurance in Louisiana. Evidence of that was my election as the president of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners in 2013, the first Louisiana insurance commissioner to hold that position in the 140-year history of the NAIC. I look forward to your questions and our opportunity here today to discuss this very important office. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to be here this afternoon to introduce myself to you. I am Tim Temple, and I'm running to be your next Commissioner of Insurance. I have over 20 plus years of actual practical insurance industry knowledge. Louisiana is facing an insurance crisis unlike what we haven't seen in 20 plus years. Louisiana is the most unaffordable state in America for insurance. Our private passenger auto rates are the second highest in the country and forecast to be number one next year. Commercial auto, specifically commercial trucking, is in a true catastrophe mode. Many insureds don't have more than one or two companies that they can obtain a quote from. And many businesses and individuals are leaving our state because insurance is more than half as expensive in Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi. This negatively impacts our entire Louisiana economy. Louisiana needs a commissioner who understands the marketplace, the distribution channels, and is dedicated to making insurance affordable again. As commissioner, I will focus on creating true competition and returning honesty and transparency to the office. Commissioner Donelon is the architect of the worst insurance market in America and has received an F rating from R Street Reports, a very conservative think tank. Louisiana is the only state to receive an F rating in 2018 and is ranked 50 for having the worst competitive marketplace in America. Louisiana needs an insurance commissioner who understands how insurance works, how it impacts people's lives, their economy, their pocketbooks, and one that is dedicated to making insurance affordable again. And that's who I intend to be as your next commissioner. Thank you.
I'll ask the initial question, and then we will open it up to members of the press club. First question is, how much legitimately can an insurance commissioner do to drive rates up or down? Mr. Temple, you are first.
The commissioner shouldn't be focused on driving rates up and down. The commissioner needs to be focused on bringing competition to the state of Louisiana. That's what changes rates up and down. As I mentioned before, in the commercial trucking arena, we have fewer companies writing those lines of business than ever before. That's why those insureds are lucky to get one or two quotes. Competition is what drives rate, not legislative mandates. Private passenger auto, again, the second highest in the country. The fact is we have fewer companies writing private passenger auto in the state of Louisiana than we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 14 years ago. My focus is going to be competition, working with companies, identifying what needs to change in state, whether it's state law or regulations, to make them competitive in the state of Louisiana so that they want to come and write your business. Thank you.
The question is a very good one, and indeed, we have very limited authority to force companies to write business at a loss in our state. Actually, State Farm's 10.5% reduction this year was done in 4 different filings, the first 3 of which each showed they were still losing money on their Louisiana book of business, but wanted to recoup the 100,000 policies they had lost the 2 years before to their competitors. They, most recently in their 4th filing, did show a slight profit, and that is encouraging them to continue to lower rates, which has brought the competition to lowering rates as well. It's our broken legal system that is the long-time cause of insurance rates being as high as they are in our state, and I, as a legislator, introduced the first effort to reform that as the Omnibus Premium Reduction Act of 1998. This last session, the 4th version was defeated in what I refer to as the lawyer committee on the Senate side.
Mark Ballard from the Advocate.
Let me follow up on that from both of you as well. The tort reform, omnibus tort reform bill, the promoters were unable to say how it would actually lower rates. What makes you think that limiting the access to the courts for victims and making it more difficult for them to succeed is going to actually lower rates in the auto insurance, and why wasn't that brought up during the session?
The question is whether limiting access to the courts can actually lower insurance rates.
The difference between my first version in 1998 and this version was mine came with a 10% mandated reduction. And indeed, that question was often asked in the Senate committee by the lawyers advocating, saying it doesn't have a mandated reduction in premiums. What it did have in place of that was a mandated filing, rate filing, each year for 3 years, which is a public record and which shows publicly that profitability of the book of business. Whether you were increasing your premiums, lowering your premiums, or making no change at all, under that law you would have had to file. The 100+ companies that write auto insurance in our state, each of them would have had to file each year for 3 years showing their profitability so that the legislature could react if they were pocketing and profiting from those needed reforms that make us an outlier in our judicial system from almost every other of the 49 states.
Again, legislating rate reductions doesn't work. The rate reductions that the commissioner talked about that were done in 1989 or 99, again, there was no actuarial proof to do that. That was something that was negotiated out in order to get the bill passed. I don't believe in legislating rate reductions. I also don't believe that we need to make the companies come and show their profit and loss every year. They already have to do that. They already have to show how that impacts their financial picture when they make rate changes. You know, we don't ask any other company, any other industry in our state to show us their profit and loss. If we do this, are we going to start calling Exxon and ask them to lower their prices because they made too much money? Insurance is a business. It is not a utility and doesn't need to be regulated that way. Tort reform needs to be approached consistently. The commissioner in 2014 was asked to participate in a Supreme Court study looking at jury trial threshold and prescription period. The response was non-responsive. You can't wait till election period to try and do tort reform. You need to work at it hard every day.
Matt?
Matt Houston, Channel 9. Should auto insurance providers be able or allowed to adjust rates based on things that have nothing to do with driving, like gender, education, prior policies?
The question was whether auto insurance providers should be able to determine rates based on factors other than driving. Mr. Temple, you're first.
I believe we should look at all factors that we can. Technology has gotten to the point now where you no longer have to look at or rely majority on your gender or your age or your zip code or your education level or your marital status. Technology is to the point now where we can start looking at individual drivers. If companies want to use technology to be innovative and make it so that your premium truly reflects your individual driving, I will certainly encourage that.
As my opponent said, insurance is a private sector, private business, and they can use whatever is not illegal to set their prices. In fact, in our state, none are using occupation or education. They are using credit, they are using gender. Back in the day when my daughters were teenagers, they paid a lot less than teenage boys did. That's not so much the case anymore. Older people pay higher than younger people. It's up to the legislature to decide whether they want to allow that or not allow that by making it a mandate or a prohibition against using those criteria on a state-by-state basis. The use of credit, we, like the majority of states, have what's called the NCOIL model, and it cannot be used for renewal, but it can be used to price new business.
Lanny Keller from The Advocate.
Along with car insurance, many individuals that I talk to are deeply concerned about health insurance, which, as I understand it, is outside the legal scope of the department now, and that may make us an outlier among the states, I think, but not exactly. But then, in any case, is that an issue that the insurance department should become more involved in, as frankly deductibles and so on become unaffordable?
Lanny Keller asked whether the insurance department should be involved, the state insurance department, in healthcare matters, healthcare insurance. Jim?
And we are involved, but we're only involved to the degree that the law allows us to be. And for years, for decades, forever actually, we did not have prior approval for health insurance, still do not, like we do for homeowners and other P&C products. We did, as a result of the Affordable Care Act, have the opportunity to get, and we do receive now, informational filings required by federal law. And the state then passed, the legislature passed a similar statute requiring that for going forward, whatever happens to the Affordable Care Act. In the last session, I introduced legislation to take the most important and popular parts of the Affordable Care Act, in case it's declared unconstitutional, and put them in state law, like no use of pre-existing conditions for renewal of health insurance if you're insured when that happens. And also, going forward, no lifetime limits and no annual limits on health insurance, which used to be the largest driver of personal financial bankruptcy in our country. Still is in states that don't have that protection at the state level if Obamacare is found to be unconstitutional.
Yes, as it's already been discussed, the Commissioner's Office does have very little oversight on that. It is federally regulated. Having said that, I know the studies say that most people in America feel that they can't afford the health care insurance that they have, whether it's the deductible or the copay or the actual premium itself. So I think the Commissioner, as Commissioner, I need to be a very strong advocate on behalf of a system that does work, that is affordable. I would work with the congressional delegation to help them understand how important affordable health care insurance is. I know the Commissioner has tried to pass a reinsurance program for health care, and that failed. I would be actively engaged in seeing why that failed, work with the legislators to work with a new bill to impact reinsurance program that we have, which again would help people lower their insurance. Thanks.
Anyone? John Hightower?
For years, one of the big problems was making sure that everybody had automobile insurance. And I know there were many loopholes in the past where people were able to get out of having actual coverage. Is that not a problem anymore? Or what do we do to make sure that people, as many people as possible, actually do have automobile insurance coverage?
The question from John Hightower is, what do we do about uninsured drivers? I think Mr. Temple. Tim, you're first.
The numbers I see show that Louisiana has on average 13% uninsured motorists, which is also the national average, right at 13% uninsured motorists. So I don't think that we have in Louisiana an uninsured motorist problem. What we have is an underinsured motorist problem. Because of the unaffordability of insurance in our state, almost half of the drivers out there carry minimum limits. That's the biggest issue that faces Louisianans.
Those numbers are correct. It is about 13%. I'm told 45% of our drivers, however, are from what you would label the working poor, and it is unaffordable for them to afford the high rates of insurance that we have to pay in our state. And that's because of our broken judicial system. Louisiana Farm Bureau, a local Baton Rouge-based company, says that they have 17% of the auto insurance policies in force in a 6-state holding company: Colorado, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Florida. But year in and year out, at the holding company meeting, Blaine Briggs, the CEO, reports back to me when Mike Strain and I are invited to their national meeting. That company has 51% of the pending lawsuits over that 17% of the auto policies in that company. 3 times our proportionate share, speaking loudly to the need for tort reform.
Mark Ballard has another question. Mark?
Let me follow up on that. Doesn't it also speak loudly to the fact that a lot of people can't afford insurance that covers what they need?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the
Well, you
question.
were saying that having 45% taking minimum speaks loudly to tort reform, but does it also not speak loudly to the fact that 45% have minimum coverage
Because of the cost of it?
because of the cost. Otherwise,
Sure.
would they be filing lawsuits?
Otherwise, would they be filing
They would be
lawsuits?
filing lawsuits if they had better than minimum coverage.
No, the mandatory coverage protects other people, not them. They can sue other people regardless of their limits. It's not first-party coverage, it's third-party coverage. It is certainly it's unaffordable. I totally agree with that. And the working poor, 45% that have minimum limits, they're just doing what the law requires of them to do to be law-abiding citizens, to their credit. They don't consider themselves to have enough in assets to buy extended coverage up to $50,000 and $100,000. They're just good, hardworking, law-abiding citizens.
But if they hit me, I would be suing them because they didn't have enough coverage to cover.
They would. That's true. But apparently they're not concerned about that as much as they are concerned about the law that requires them to have insurance and the possibility they'll, A, be stopped. It could be that their car would be seized, and it certainly would be if they let their insurance lapse, that the Office of Motor Vehicles would put a flag on their license, and the legislature increased those penalties for driving while uninsured, letting your insurance lapse significantly during the last administration.
I think your question is spot on. It's the unaffordability of insurance in Louisiana. I don't think that people buy minimum limits because they don't have assets to cover it. I think it's because it impacts their pocketbooks. And if they can save $100 a month or $200 a month, that's real money. And if that means buying minimum limits, then that's what they do, because that's money that they can put towards some other bill. So it is a crisis, as I said before. And talking about a handful of insurance companies that have lowered rates and they're just swapping insureds, moving them back and forth amongst themselves, is not a solution. A solution is bringing more companies in. When you have more companies, those rates will go down, and when those rates go down, I believe people will start to purchase higher insurance rates. Higher insurance limits.
Please stand.
Mine is an easy question.
Could you tell us?
Yes, my name is Mike Jackson. Mine is an easy question. What role, if any, does your office play with regard to business kinds of insurance? In other words, insurance that would protect officers of directors of business corporations, and like Fidelity insurance, and against officers of directors and that kind of thing. And would it be better if we had an expanded role for your office in connection with that?
All right. That's Ike Jackson, who is a candidate for Attorney General, asking about business insurance. Tim Temple?
Yes, that would fall under property and casualty business, which is regulated by the Department of Insurance. My understanding is, and I've traveled the state since I announced in January. I've been to almost every parish. I've talked to business people in all of those parishes. That has not been a concern that has been a voice to me. Everyone in this state talks about the unaffordability of their auto insurance, whether it's private passenger or commercial, health insurance. Those are the drivers right now. But I don't believe that that's an issue. I don't perceive it to be an issue within the state of Louisiana. If it is, I would certainly have discussions on that and find out what solutions. If it needs to be more markets, again, that would be one I'd want to try and get more markets to for that line of coverage.
We regulate all forms of insurance. I refer to us sometimes as the Better Business Bureau for insurance. If there are concerns, problems, or abuses taking place in any form of insurance, that's what we are there to do. First and foremost, to protect consumers. And the first responsibility under that is to monitor for solvency. And back to the auto insurance crisis in our state. It will necessarily involve the legislature doing tort reform, as similar crises have taken place in the past in medical malpractice, which the reform there took the system out of the judicial process and put reforms in place that worked and are working today. And I hear no complaints about that. Workers' comp, same thing. It required some tort reform as well as competition that has flooded to our state in recent years in the aftermath. property insurance after Katrina and Rita. It took the legislature to do a statewide building code to encourage companies to come write business in our exposed state.
John DuPont.
John DuPont, Point Banner. During the summer, your office had ordered a cease and desist against State Farm after they had required a higher deductible for damage before a storm was declared a hurricane. Is there needed for maybe some more mandates or more control over the property insurance, homeowners insurance to prevent these kind of things? I mean, how do you go about regulating something like that in the future?
John DuPont of the Point Banner asked about mandates for private insurers, noting that State Farm was involved in a dispute of some kind earlier this year. Jim Donelon?
I don't think additional legislation or mandates is necessary in that area. We have one law in that area that applies, and I think it's universal, at least in coastal states, and that is the arbiter of what is a hurricane and what is a tropical storm is the National Weather Service. That was relatively new 4 or 5 years ago. But mandating what the coverage needs to be or not be is really an unnecessary infringement. We have a dispute with State Farm over their hurricane deductible, the reading of their language. That's, I'm told, in place in 8 other states, including Mississippi and up and down the Atlantic coast. That's now on appeal at the Division of Administrative Law. It's a very rare instance where that kind of disagreement breaks out. I prefer to let the companies compete with each other and that competition benefit their policyholders in the marketplace.
I would prefer to let that dispute play out privately the way it should be instead of issuing a press release for political gain. My understanding was that was over one policyholder that filed a complaint. Certainly the Department of Insurance issues cease and desist orders on a regular basis. I don't think that they issue press releases on them on a regular basis until election year. So I don't think that any reform needs to be done there. I don't think anything needs to be looked into. We need to let the system play out and let it work through the process.
Please stand.
Rami DeLucia, Press Club member. Louisianians approaching 65 will have questions about Medicare. And in my particular case, I had a question about whether or not I'd be put in an age group that changed from year to year or stayed the same, my financial advisor. I contacted Medicare, they didn't have the answers. I contacted the Department of Insurance, and they had precise, concise answers, and they knew what was in Louisiana. Is that a waste of resources, or is that a positive? Because several years later, I also checked with the Department of Insurance again, and once again from my sister, they had those concise, precise answers for Medicare. Is that indicative of the department, or is that a waste of resources?
All right, Remy DeLucia asked about the Administration for Medicare, which of course is a federal program, saying the Department of Insurance was able to give him information, and then he asks, is that a waste of resources? Jim Donelon.
Well, I'm certainly glad we were able to help you and through you, your sister as well. Certainly not a waste of resources. We have what's called a SHIP program, a senior health insurance program, federally funded. We have 6 people that do that on an ongoing basis around the year, reaching out to Council on Aging's in the very complex arena of Medicare coverage, Medicare Advantage, Medicare supplement, prescription drug coverage, the donut hole. All of it is mind-boggling to elderly folks trying to protect their health by getting the right coverage that they can afford for their health insurance needs. And all 50 states are funded for a senior health insurance program like we have here in Louisiana.
I would echo Commissioner Donelon. There suddenly doesn't sound like a waste of resources there. It sounds like federal dollars were helping the Department of Insurance provide a service that they couldn't do at the federal level. So, and I'm glad that worked out for you. It sounds like we need to get some of the people in that department and move them over to the private passenger auto and commercial auto divisions and see if they can help out on that side.
Yes, sir, please stand.
David Jacobs, Center Square. So y'all talk a lot about competition, but just name a few specific things that the insurance commissioner can do to get more companies to come to Louisiana without legislative assistance, without changing the statute.
All right, David Jacobs asked about getting insurance companies to do business in Louisiana without legislative action. Tim?
Yeah, two quick things. One, identify companies that used to write in the state of Louisiana and no longer do. Go visit with the leadership of those companies, the president, ask them why they left and what changes that need to be made so that they'll come back and start writing business. One example that I know, and I've spoken with insurance companies, the current commissioner only allows insurance companies to file for a rate increase once every 12 months. That's an illegal action. It's called a desk rule. He does not have legislative authority to do that. Insurance companies have indicated that if you get rid of that one desk rule, they'll come back and write in the state of Louisiana. That gives them back the ability to manage their risk, to change their pricing as market conditions allow, not when the commissioner says that it's all right.
I've been told that he's been promising that to companies all across the campaign trail. And I will tell you, most states in the Southeast Zone, because we've discussed this in Southeast Zone commissioner meetings, have the exact same rule of thumb. And I dare say, if actuaries are worth their money, then they can predict for more than 6 months at a time what their adequate rate need is. And in fact, in South Carolina, the state law says not more than once a year unless there's a solvency issue involved or a decrease, both of which I acknowledge in my operation, in my regulation of insurance in our state. So the real benefit of one per year is competition, being able to see the full effect of rate increases that their competitor is taking, and by doing so, offer a more affordable policy to those folks who are looking for less expensive coverage.
Mark, if you have one more. Mark Ballard, yeah.
Mr. Temple, you said that on day one that you would identify the laws that are inhibiting the insurance industry in Louisiana. Surely by now you have at least one or two examples.
Okay, what are the laws inhibiting insurance in Louisiana?
I said I would work with stakeholders to identify laws and regulations. Yes, certainly from day one, and I will. And as I just said, I've identified one already that insurance companies, call it promising if you want, but if my goal is to bring more companies, true competition to the state of Louisiana, and that is what they have identified as prohibiting them from coming in the state, that's one right there. That's not a law, it's a regulation, but I will certainly do that. Again, I'm not focused on a handful of companies already in the state of Louisiana fighting over our business just back and forth. You write them one year, we'll write them the next. We need new blood, new companies in the state of Louisiana, not just focusing on the handful that write today.
If he really wants to introduce a bill to allow rate increases every 6 months, he can do it as a private citizen through any legislator in the House or the Senate. I dare say it's DOA. They are not going to require that I approve rate increases every 6 months just to please insurance companies that want to sneak rate increases by in half bites every 6 months rather than putting it out there for the public to know what they're charging so that they can look for cheaper alternatives.
Both of you gentlemen are Republicans. What are you doing to reach out to people of various political stripes other than those that are members of the GOP? Jim?
I am elected to regulate. I am not a partisan elected official. I look at my role similar to that of a judge, and I am certainly reaching out to members of the other party. I am very proud to have Senator J.P. Morell's support, Sheriff Marlon Guzman's support in my neighboring parish of Orleans. I went before with my opponent, the AFL-CIO, and sought their support and got a approved or favorable rating from them for my re-election campaign, and just recently got endorsed by the Building Trades Council of the New Orleans metropolitan area. A bipartisan group called the Alliance for Good Government had a forum and offered their endorsement, and I sought it and am proud to have that endorsement. I represent everybody, whatever party, no party they belong to. That's my job. I've done it that way for 13 years and will continue to do it in the years going forward. Thank you.
Yes, we both are Republican, but insurance is about pocketbook, not party. Last time I checked, when I renewed my insurance, there was not anywhere on the application that asked what my party affiliation was. Do the job properly, it impacts everyone positively, regardless of what your party is, your zip code, your gender, doesn't matter. So, yes, I'm reaching out to everyone because everybody in this state, everybody in this room is suffering from the most expensive marketplace in America.
Melinda DeLotte?
Are either or both of you taking donations from the insurance industry? And if you are, how do you explain to voters that that's acceptable since you regulate that industry?
Melinda DeLotte of the Associated Press asked if either or both of the candidates are taking money from the insurance industry, and how do you square that with the concerns of the electorate and the business of doing the job? Jim?
Thank you. Indeed, I am, and my opponent is as well. And just like the governor, who regulates everything and takes campaign contributions from across the board interest, I'm doing so as well. But it's not just insurance interest. I have contributions from over 1,000 contributors in 55 of our 64 parishes, to include people like Boise Bollinger, groups like the Louisiana Restaurant Association, people like Sam Haynes of Blue Bayou here in town, and other associations like the Louisiana Home Builders, Realtors, Louisiana Bankers, etc. It is part of the process. I'm not as wealthy as my opponent. I can't afford to put 1.1 million of my own money into my campaign fund. So, as typically in the process, the electoral process, I am seeking campaign contributions and paying for my campaign without any commitments, obligations, or connections to my official duties.
The current commissioner and I can both agree. We both have a mutual friend, Boise. Yes, I have put my own money in this. I am running for this race the first time. I haven't been commissioner of insurance for 14 years where I can pick up the phone and browbeat people to contribute to my campaign. So if someone was willing to contribute to my campaign, I don't think I would turn it down. But so to your question on insurance concerns, donating, I don't see a problem with that as long as you represent everyone and not just a certain specific industry. I would also look at campaign contributions and look at trial attorneys. I've received $0 from trial attorneys, or actually no attorneys. My opponent, on the other hand, has quite a hefty contribution from trial attorneys.
Gary?
Being a host of an outdoor show and being outdoorsman all my life, there's a lot of problems lately about flood insurance. All on the Gulf Coast, especially here in Louisiana, it's just getting outrageous. And some of the people I know, is there any help in the future? Is there anything that's going to be done with help from the federal government? What can be done to lower some of these flood insurance policies?
Gary Rasponi asked about the price of flood insurance and what can be done to lower those rates. Jim? I think it's Tim. It's Tim.
Flood insurance is very important to every parish in our state. I believe in 2016, it was something like 62 or 61 of 64 parishes, or maybe all 64 parishes were declared flood zone at, almost during the same time. So it's important no matter where you live in our state. I know that the congressional delegation is working hard to get the reauthorization of the national flood insurance program, which is very important to everyone here. But also we need to work with, as commissioner, work with the congressional delegation to help create some other solutions that would help private flood companies come into the state. As I said, the NFIP is federally funded, so that means you and I are all funding our flood protection. I would like to see an eventual shift. I don't know how long that would take, but I would certainly want to work and encourage that to take place.
No doubt about it. Absolutely critical to our state. And I am very proud of the fact that in 2013, the year I was president of the NAIC, the Biggert Waters Act was passed, and without knowing what was in it, it would have devastated our state's economy. It would have ruined, actually rendered worthless tens of thousands of properties in coastal parishes. I carried to a meeting in the White House with then President Obama, handed it to him after we got through talking about the NAIC issue. He invited me there to discuss and asked him to read it, and we were successful in rolling back those draconian rate increases that came with Biggert Waters to the level, not inexpensive today, but actually manageable over the past 5 years. I go from here to New Orleans to meet with Congressman Steve Scalise. I have worked closely with the entire congressional delegation, Democrat and Republican, and will continue to do so to get the best coverage at the best price that we, the most dependent state in America on that program, can possibly obtain.
Matt Houston.
Would either of you support a ban on the widow penalty, where drivers or rates go up based on whether or not their spouse is alive?
Do either of you support an abolition of the so-called widow penalty for driver's insurance? And Jim, you were first.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to support it. Know that it's not being utilized in Louisiana by any companies today. It had been for a while, for a short period of time, a couple of years ago. We got a consumer complaint and addressed it with the company, who voluntarily backed off on utilizing it. But yes, that's probably a good suggestion just in case someone would want to go there in the future.
I would echo that. I would be in favor of doing away with that if it is indeed being utilized. But again, to get a little bit deeper, I would want to work with the industry to create other ways for them to more accurately predict what the premium needs to be on an individual basis and not on a large group basis.
Please stand, Bill. Please stand.
Bill Hewitt, Press Club member. Earlier, Mr. Temple said that insurance is a business, not a utility. Mr. Donelon went as far as to say it's a business. Insurance is mandated. Shouldn't it be regulated like a utility?
Bill Huey asks if insurance is mandated, shouldn't it be regulated as a utility would be? Tim Temple.
I've already answered that one. No, I do not believe it should be mandated like a utility. Insurance is a free market product, and free market means you have the choice to pick your individual coverage. It may something you may need that I may not need. You may like a particular carrier's way of handling claims. You may like that they have an 800 number versus a live person. It doesn't need to be regulated like a utility. It does need to be regulated to the point that the companies are solvent, and that the insurance that they sell is not discriminatory, and that it's not excessive. But beyond that, it's a free market product, and living in America and being a capitalist, I believe that it doesn't need to be regulated like a utility.
I would agree that it does not need to be regulated like utilities, but I do support the level of regulation we have in our state. Know that we're one of only 15 states in America that have prior approval of rates before they can be put in place and utilized by a company. And that level of prior approval prevented two really bad things from happening in our state. One was price optimization, and the other was the use of a CAT fund called EquiCat several years ago after Katrina and Rita. So I believe in a level of regulation. I don't believe that the regulation is necessary to the degree that utility companies are regulated, not only in our state, but in all 50 states.
We have a few minutes before our final statements from each candidate, and we've done this on occasion when there are just two candidates, as there are in this race, which means that this election will be settled on October 12th. Each of you has the opportunity now to ask the other a question, and there will be a 2-minute time to respond for this, and I believe you were first, Tim.
I would just ask that Commissioner Donelon, you have spent the last, I guess since February of this year, traveling the state, telling everybody that a handful of insurance companies, you like to name them out, advertise for them, I guess, that they have done rate reductions. You have made the statement as recently as today that those rate reductions have positively impacted 1.5 million auto policy holders, when I don't think that's true. We know that it's a weighted average. That means it doesn't apply to everybody. So I ask, why do you believe that, one, naming insurance companies when they do rate reductions is a good thing, advertising for them, and two, do you truly believe that those rate reductions impact in a downward trend for every 1.5 million auto policies?
Not only do I believe it, I know it to be a fact, unless the representations made by those companies to our regulators were fraudulent. And if they are fraudulent, that's a felony, and they need to go off to jail. Those three companies have 1.5 million auto policies in place in our state. Those policies were reduced this year by those three companies. I don't mind naming them. I want more to come down and compete with them. State Farm, Louisiana Farm Bureau, and Progressive. And I'm not advertising for anybody. I am telling the public there are savings to be had by competition and shopping. And it's my job to do that. And it's my job. Earlier, I was criticized for issuing a cease and desist to State Farm for improperly adjusting claims after Hurricane Barry. That's my job. And issuing a press release is to let those who were impacted by that erroneous use of that policy language know that they have recourse. They have alternatives. That's what we do as a regulator, and I'm very proud of the fact that we do that. I'm hoping that I can expect, there's 3 million policies, auto policies in our state. Half of the market, the combination of 3 of our top 6, have lowered their rates. I want the other half to be pressured by my publicity, my speeches, my comments around the state to lower their rates as well. I know it was caused by State Farm losing 100,000 of their policies over the 2 years before that, and they want those policies back. I want the other companies like Farm Bureau, Progressive, Allstate, Travelers, Liberty Mutual to lower their premiums so that they don't lose those policies back to State Farm or anyone else who has lowered their premiums. That's what we're there to do.
Okay, you have a chance to ask Mr. Temple.
Okay. Now I won't ask him that, but the temptation is to ask if he knows what the salary is and is it worth $1.1 million to obtain.
I do know what the salary is, but the money that I'm putting in this campaign, it's not to buy an office. It's not an annuity. It's not a pension I'm after. It's an investment in the state of Louisiana. It's an investment in each and every one of you here. I think that we need to take the commissioner's office in a new direction, and that is one that is focused on competition. And that's why I'm willing to put my money up, is to bring my knowledge, my expertise, my understanding of the marketplace to truly drive competition by bringing new companies in, not just protecting the ones that are here.
You have a final statement now, Tim Temple. You are first. For your final statement?
Oh, my final statement? Sure.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? 1 minute? Thank you all for today. I've enjoyed the questions. I always enjoy Commissioner Donelon, and I know we're racing against each other, but I do truly have a lot of admiration for him. As you can see, I'm not a career politician. I have silver hair, but not a silver tongue. I don't come from a political dynasty. I come from an insurance legacy. I have over 20 years of insurance industry, and when elected, I plan to bring true competition, honesty, and transparency back to the office. Under the current commissioner, Louisiana received an F. There's no denying that. I have copies of the R Street report. I'd be happy to share those with you afterwards. We were the only state in 2018 received the F. In 2017, the first time Louisiana received it, we were one of 4 states. So we're not moving in the positive direction. And again, it indicates that Louisiana has the worst competitive regulatory system in the state of Louisiana. It's evidence of why we have fewer companies that want to write business, primarily in our private passenger auto and our commercial trucking. The commissioner has held office or a bureaucratic post for 51 years. He's had 14 years as commissioner to pass tort reform and lower rates, and he's failed. The time for fast talk and false claims is over. It's time for action. I'm running to represent and help Louisianans make their lives better through truly affordable insurance. This election, voters have a clear choice: the status quo or change with a fresh approach and a focus on making insurance affordable. Thank you again for the invitation today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this very, very important job that will be decided on October 12th. Let me address the R Street Institute. They are a industry-funded think group, small think tank that wants no regulation, that wants rate increases to be allowed every 6 months, which I have opposed, and most of my colleagues across the Southeast have opposed as well, with 1 or 2 exceptions. That is not consumer friendly. Let me talk, Mark, to your question about would these higher rates be driving folks to have minimum limits of insurance as well? Probably so in some instances, and certainly those folks will benefit by our efforts to reform the judicial system and lower their cost and put us in line with other states, not at the top as we've been for decades in the auto insurance arena. I am very proud of what we have been able to do as regulators of insurance in our state. A very complex, very expensive, but absolutely vital part of everyone's life in our state, both at home and in the workplace, making our role very, very important to the entire state. I am so pleased with the opportunity to represent the great state of Louisiana at this point in my career as its regulator of that important part of our state's ongoing economy and growth. I was very pleased with the recovery, remarkable recovery, that we were able to make from the worst insured loss event in the history of insurance, Hurricane Katrina. Working with the legislature, working with then Governor Blanco, we far exceeded our fondest expectations of attracting now 31 companies to replace the exiting major national carriers who bailed out of coastal exposure all across America. Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to working with you in the press for the next 4 years, as we have in the past. Thank you.
Let's give them a... Thank you, Jim Donelon and Tim Temple.